So before we left on the honeymoon, before we got married, I had sent out inquiries to state departments of education, and I was told by my counselor at BU, uh, and by the way, I started my master's right then and there, summer school, but he told me the best thing to do is, see the baby, there was no baby boomer boom, but the big boom hadn't hit the high schools yet, see? And so they didn't have that big a need for high school teachers in the big cities anyway.
Right.
So I was told, go to these small states like Wyoming, Montana, Colorado, and you'll find openings for what you wanted. And I wanted my openings in baseball, basketball, football, history, and English. And so I sent out all these inquiries. We get back from the honeymoon, I had 3 answers already. One was not appealing to me, it was in Montana. And another one, I didn't think that I'd want to live in North Dakota.
Oh, God.
So the third one was from Crowley, Colorado. When we get back from the honeymoon, that's what I got, Crowley, Colorado. And I looked at that, they wanted a high school teacher, teaching history and English, excuse me, and they wanted a football, baseball, and basketball coach.
Wow.
Perfect. $2,100 a year. But
What did that mean? I mean, what was that? What was that? Is that good pay?
$2,100 a year. That time, it was, school teaching salaries are always bad. But it's $2,100. We're going to live in a small town in Colorado.
Yeah.
But there's a footnote. I got $100 per sport, and I got $50 if I drove the school bus.
Oh my God.
On occasion. And so I had $2,400, and there was no promise for Judy. She went to an elementary education college, a little small school in Boston, training her to be a kindergartner or first and second grade teacher. So I wrote a letter back. That's the only way you can get in touch in those days. I wrote a letter back, and I said, I would like the job. So they wrote me a letter back next week or so, and with a contract. Big contract for 21 plus the 100. Make sure that's in the contract. And I sent it back, and we had a job. I had a job.
No interview or anything?
Nothing.
Yeah.
Nothing. Well, I had to send them my high school my college transcript,
Right.
and I sent that to them. And when I sent out the letter of inquiry, and they hired me.
Crazy.
Now, I worked that summer with a catering truck, delivering sandwiches and all that stuff. And Judy worked in a dress shop in Quincy. We stayed in my house because my mother and father spent the whole summer down at the beach house that one of the sisters had. So that worked out real well. We had the house for 6 weeks anyway. And then we got ready to pack the car, all of our belongings, all of our our wedding presents in the back of Judy's brother's car, which I had bought from him, Sam. Sam is gone. Dick is Sam's brother. But he had a 3-year-old Chevy, and I was able to buy that at a very, very good price from him. And so we had a car, and it was the same car we had driven down to Florida. Then I borrowed it from him. So we got ready to leave, and we wanted to make sure we had plenty of time to get to Colorado. We would do there on September such and such, and we wanted to take a nice quiet drive across country. The only way we could get there, all the belongings in the back seat of the Chevrolet, literally all of our belongings. And so after that summer, we set a departure date and loaded the car and left, going to Colorado. And I stopped off at my my aunt's house. My grandmother had already died in New Jersey to say hello. We stayed and spent the night with them, one cheap night. And the motels in those days, they started a lot of motels popping up all of a sudden. They were all $4 a night, $5 a night. Gasoline was 18 cents a gallon.
What changed before that suddenly now there were motels?
Sorry?
What changed in history that suddenly there were motels?
Well, they came up with the name motor hotel. That's what motel is,
Just more people had cars and more people were driving?
No, because the houses only had 4 or 5 bedrooms at the most. The motels could have 25, 30, 40.
Okay.
Yeah. The automobiles were very much in favor at that time, Plenty of gasoline, 18 cents a gallon, so on. But we had a wonderful drive across country. We stopped at the Iowa State Fair, And then we got to Colorado. When we got to Colorado, I had the address of the superintendent's house. He was actually a principal of the high school, but they call him a superintendent of the elementary and the high school. And the first thing he says, he didn't even care about me. The first thing he said is this beautiful woman getting out of the car, Judy, and he said, I understand from your husband that you have been trained as a elementary teacher. She says, yes, I had written that in my letter to him. How would you like to teach second grade?
Wow.
She got a job right then and there. Right then and there.
And how much did she get paid?
19.
Wow, that's great.
We did very nicely, let me
Yeah.
tell you. We were able to get a beautiful furnished apartment for $50, 7 miles away. It worked out real well. And we had a ball in Crowley, and I still am very close touch with Crowley. That meant a lot to us. Did you ever read the story I wrote about your mother,
Yeah.
about your grandmother in Crowley?
Yeah.
That was just a beautiful thing. They named a classroom after her and all that. But anyway, we had a great time there, and I sure enjoyed coaching.
How
But-
long did you teach there?
Just 1 year, because I'll tell you what happened. I went back to Boston to finish my master's. And I met a guy who was a principal of a brand new high school in West Bridgewater, Massachusetts. And he gave me an offer, just like that.
Wow.
So I took it. Why go back to Colorado? He had more money and it's close by, and fine, so we did that. And he also was able to offer Judy a job
Didn't
at
you
one of the elementary schools in the same district.
didn't you
So
coach
that worked.
basketball at
Yeah,
Crowley?
at Crowley, yeah, of course,
Yeah.
basketball, football, and baseball. Now, there's a little footnote there. When I got my final letter from the superintendent about 3 weeks before we're ready to leave. Mr. Tara, I think I want to remind you that we play six-man football. It's a small high school. I knew nothing about six-man football. The rules are entirely different. I run to the Boston Public Library and I found a tiny little book on six-man football, and I digested that book. And I wrote down the plays and everything else. So that's what happened. I was coaching six. Didn't have enough kids in high school. We only had
Wow.
32 boys. So with six-man football, you could have 3 squads. You know, you could have 18 kids playing basketball, 2 squads, and 3 squads of football.
I never knew you liked football.
Huh?
I never knew you liked football.
6-man. It's big in the small schools in the West.
She's saying she never knew you liked football.
No, but you know, to coach it, why not? You know, I knew enough about it. And baseball, I had 10 kids on the team. It was spring planting time. I had 10 kids, so 1 kid sat beside me on the bench.
Wow.
But we did real well in baseball and basketball. Anyway, that was Crowley. Crowley was wonderful. And I told you I got this job with West Bridgewater, Massachusetts, which I took. And we started at West Bridgewater, Massachusetts that next year. And by that time, I already had my master's. I had all the classwork. No, I had to take a couple of courses at Bridgewater State Teachers College
What was your master's degree
in educational psychology.
Okay.
So that brings us right up to so my job teaching at West Bridgewater was nice. I liked it. I just coached basketball there, and I taught history in the high school, history and English, and it was fun and not a lot of money either. And by that time, 1954, Barney was born. In 1956, Gail was born. But in 1954, when Barney was born, I said, you know, I had a lot of part-time jobs, which I didn't tell you much about. I picked apples.
Wow.
I drove taxis while I was teaching school. I worked in a hardware store. All of these part-time jobs to make enough money to make ends meet while teaching. I drove a taxi for 3 years down in West Bridgewater.
Wow.
When you're talking about making ends meet,
Yeah.
what's your goal? Like, are you
Well,
because you want to buy a house because
Well,
you
yeah,
want
no,
to?
we already bought a house
Okay.
on GI Bill.
Okay,
Yeah, we bought a house for 10,700.
but you had a mortgage.
Yeah, I had a little mortgage, not much, but I was able to make. But we wanted extra money for that. I worked in a steakhouse. I worked on a dishwashing machine in a steakhouse, very well known, Ken's Steakhouse on the Worcester Turnpike
Okay.
in Massachusetts. So they had teachers working in the kitchen, you know. That's all you had in there. Working on the dishwashing machine, you had 6 teachers, you know. But at that point, I decided, you know, if anything comes up where I can make a little bit more money so we can have another child, which is your mother, I contacted my Boston University Alumni Association. not Emerson, because Emerson didn't do much in placement in those days. But at Boston University, they were very active. So they gave me a call during my last month or so at Wellesley High School, where I taught at Wellesley High School. And at that point, they said, are you interested in leaving school teaching? I says, yes. Well, it's one word answer. Well, we have a company from California that's interviewing out at MIT. And I think you would fit the picture. They're looking for school teachers. They're doing a big training job with the Air Force. Would you like to be interviewed? I said, oh yes, sure. So I show up for the interview with a suit on and a tie, the only one I own, you know. And I have a little briefcase, one that you carry, not with a handle or anything. And I had in there my resume and all that kind of crap. And I walk into the office at MIT's Lincoln Laboratories at Bedford Air Force Base, and the guy from Rand is sitting there with a Hawaiian shirt on, shorts and sandals. I said,
Rand?
hey, this is the company I want to join,
Yeah.
you know, yeah. So what I did then is, again, go through an interview, and I had to take a test. I must have knocked the test right in the eye, because he said, look, I'm not even going to bother saying anything more to you. You're working with us if you'd like to. $12,000.
Wow.
I was hitting the ceiling.
This is
I
from
went,
making.
I went from $4,800 in my last teaching job to $12,000 overnight. So I said, I am never going back to teaching. But the thing is this, Rand hired me because I was a teacher, and I did a lot of teaching at Rand. A lot of teaching, Air Force teaching and all that. So I was giving classes everywhere. But a little different, you know, it made it worthwhile.
Can you just paint a picture of that moment? Like you have this interview, Judy knows about it.
Yeah.
At this point, you guys have thought. Do you know that it's a California job? What are the two of you talking about?
Well, I had told her before I went for the interview that the plan was for 2 years to be at Lincoln Laboratory, then they're going to move everybody to California. She knew that.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't know much about it until after I met with this guy. His name was Bob Nash. And then when I came home, I said, I got the job. Wow, that was something. So we spent 2 years more in our home in Natick. We lived in Natick, Massachusetts, and knew that in about 2 years they're going to close up shop at MIT and go back to Santa Monica. That was the whole plan. They hired 400 people,
Wow.
all teachers. They just stripped the teachers of Massachusetts and Connecticut and Vermont and Maine to work on this big project. It was a giant project with IBM. And
What was
Air
the
Force.
project?
Air Defense. You know, there's the Cold War days,
Yeah.
which I call the faux war, F-A-U-X. The Cold War days, and everybody frightened to death. So, you know, air defense, what are we going to do? Why the Russians have long-range bombers and all this? So Rand, being a research and development company, that's where the name came from, Research and Development, R-A-N-D. And we were very much in the front lines of this kind of thing. And I had the background for it, I had the masters for it, everything else fit in beautifully.
What's your day to day at this laboratory? What were you doing day to day?
At Lincoln Lab?
Yeah.
We were drawing up all the plans for the training of the Air Force and Air Defense and computerizing them. That's the first time I heard the word computer. It was all to go on a large-scale computer, and every Air Force base in the world would have tie-ins to it, and every place in Canada would have tie-ins in case the Russians came over the pole. It was all this kind of spooky stuff, you know. And but you know, every time I get that paycheck, I said, that's okay. Spooky is good. But it worked out real well at Rand, and I stayed with Rand. I had some very nice times with Rand. I traveled everywhere.
Grandpa,
with
was
Rand.
Grandma still working at the elementary school?
In Massachusetts?
Yeah.
No, she had the two babies. You know,
Okay.
No, she wasn't working in. But she did when we got to California. She went
Okay.
back to teach school. She loved it. She was a classic school teacher, you know. She would not be teaching today, I'll tell you why. You can't touch the kids.
Right.
And she used to hold them on her lap, and she was the most loving school teacher you ever saw in your life. She wouldn't make it today. And I did the same. You know, I'm arm around kids. You can't do that today. Anyway, that's an aside, a sad aside. But yeah, we found out 2 years later we're ready to go to California. And I went to California on business once while all this happened. And that's when I met Ronald Reagan. I think I was telling you that story.
No.
You know, it,
How did you get there? By train or by plane?
we were flying at that time.
Okay.
Well, it was 9 hours. 9 hours from Boston to LA.
Prop plane.
Yeah. 9 hours.
What was your first experience like flying?
I flew with IBM to visit their plant in Poughkeepsie, New York. And so they sent their plane for a bunch of us at MIT to fly there for the day and then fly back. And I think it probably flew at 6,000 feet of the most.
Wow.
You can count the street lights down below.
Wow.
That was my first experience. It was great.
And then when you're moving to California, what do you do with all your? I mean, the house, the stuff, the logistics
I'll
of that.
tell you,
Yeah.
hey, I'll tell you, it's all off the top of my head. I put the house up for sale about a year before we were ready to move. No, 6 months before. They sold pretty fast in those days. Cheap houses. They were GI homes, 10,007, a beautiful little place in Natick.
Grandma lives
And so we put it up for sale, and the broker said, I think we'll ask 13.3. To me, my eyes are going like this, more money than I ever heard of in my life, $13,300? Wow, I'm gonna make a profit in this house. And that's what they sold it for,
Wow.
13.3. So I had a pocket full of money to go to California with. Little did I know that California didn't go that far. But yeah, the last night before I left on a plane the next day with the family, I went to a Red Sox game with a bunch of the Rand guys. Wanted to say goodbye to the Red Sox. Ted Williams hit a home run for us
Wow.
at that game. Amazing. But so we came to California on September the 1st, I believe, 1957. And your mother was a year old, and Barney was 3 years old.
Had you ever been to California? You never been to California before?
Well, I
that,
had
right?
been.
Oh, you
I
had.
went there in business.
Okay.
You know, for Rand. You know, I went there
Okay.
for Rand. You know,
Okay.
and of course, I'd been to California, was in the Army, get discharged here.
Got it.
But that worked out really well. And the kids were thrilled flying. Oh my God, your mother was 1 year old. And Barney was having a great time, you know, 3-year-old flying in first class.
Really?
Rand flew everybody first class.
Wow.
They had a government contract, and in the contract was first class wherever we go. So that was a nice way to go. On a DC-7, you know, we'd be up front in a little cabin they had, like, you know, first class. But we got to California at the old LAX and piled the kids into a taxi. And I already had, Rand had made reservations for us at a motel on Santa Monica Boulevard. And Judy was looking out the windows at all the palm trees and everything else. She says, you think we're going to stay here? I says, I think so. She says, okay. She never looked back. Quite a few of the families got homesick. They were New Englanders, and California is as different as night and day, as you know. And quite a few went back. I'd say maybe 10% went back after a year or two, but we never had any idea of going back. We're here to stay. And I've loved it ever since.
You were close to your parents. How was that hard?
What's that?
You were close with your parents.
Yeah, it was very hard. But I had promised them that I look forward to seeing them every year for a month. My dad was retired by that time. And they'd come out for the month of February every year. And we'd take them to Disneyland and to here in Vegas, everywhere. And they had a ball with the kids. You know, we turned the kids right over. I mean, all yours. And yeah, it worked well. It was tough. You know, I was saying goodbye to my family, the whole family, you know, so close. But they all came out for weddings. They all came out for your mother's wedding, for Barney's wedding, and for Shane's wedding.
Hillary.
Hillary. What am I talking about? Hillary, yeah, that's Hillary. Hillary and Barney were married the same year, 1982.
I'll make sure she doesn't see that part.
Oh, yeah. And yeah, your mother was 1977. Yeah. So they came out for all of that. And then they came out here permanently for the last 4 years of their life.
Huh.
They came out in 1981.
I like that story. You told them they were moving. You didn't ask. You just got them out here.
Oh, I didn't ask anymore. I told them.
Yeah.
I said, you're going. I bought a little condo for them in Woodland Hills, a little place, and they loved it. But anyway, that's what took us. But in the meantime, I'm leaving out quite a bit here, which I'm going to get back to. I have a way of getting back. And what did I do? I left Rand after about 7 years. I had a ball. 1 month vacation every year.
Wow.
Plus your sick leave you could use as vacation was another 10 days. and it was mandatory. You had to take that time off. Like, again, in a government contract. So we had a ball, you know, we rented a place down in Malibu a couple of times for all the kids, and went down to San Diego one time, did all these things. And when I left Rand, I left because a friend of mine who was with IBM, a very close friend of mine who's no longer alive, an awfully nice man, Harold Wallace was his name, went to work with Honeywell. Honeywell had a computer division, and they were hiring people who've had some experience with the very things we were working with Rand, you know, large-scale equipment and so forth. So he had taken over as their training department manager. And he called me on the phone. He said, "Are you sticking with Rand, or can I entice you to come away?" I says, "Well, entice me, man. What are you going to say?" Well, he says, "How would 18,000 sound?" God. I said, "That sounds fine." Because at Rand, I got a little raise, you know, in my first couple of years there, but 18 was a good start. It was a really good start. And so he hired me as his West Coast education director. And that's about what I had done for the companies I worked with after I left Rand. And my job was to train clients of Honeywell in the use of their hardware, their computers. So I designed training programs for them. I worked everywhere from San Diego to Vancouver at Honeywell client offices. I was having a great time, just a great time. And with Rand, of course, I did a lot of traveling. Also with the Air Defense. I went to Canada, I went to Resolution Island up in Baffin Bay. I spent a month up there in one of these Quonset huts, freezing cold in January. So I had a lot of travel experience. And also with Rand, I bumped into some people who were working with the Office of Naval Intelligence. They could be bad dudes. Office of Naval Intelligence, purely cloak and dagger. And I was in their company many times with Rand as we were doing work with the Air Force, they were doing work with the Navy, and they invited me one time to go to Russia with them. Remember, we were in a Cold War, a phony war I call it, with Russia at that time. But they were trading secrets with the Russians on training individuals. They were trading secrets on training individuals in various functions of computerized air defense. So the Russians wanted to trade secrets with us. We'll give you yours, you give us yours, this kind of thing. And I was one of 6 people they sent over there.
Wow.
Now, nobody in the family knew about this. They all suspected it. Nobody knew. I told them I was going back east.
Did Judy know?
We couldn't talk about it. It was pure secret. But with the freedom of information that came out 12 years ago, I can talk about it to anybody now.
Did Judy know?
Huh? Yeah, she knew, but she wasn't to tell the kids or anybody. No, she knew. Of course she knew. Yeah. But
Was it just the one trip, or was it several trips?
no, one trip for that. And the other trips I went to Canada and all that. That was pretty steady traveling and that kind of stuff. And that's when I met Harry Truman.
Wow.
Did I tell you about that?